I never thought one night could change everything. Maya Jackson muttered to herself as she stared out the window, the city lights below flickering like tiny stars. Just a few months ago, her life was predictable, simple even. She had a steady job, friends she could rely on, and a routine that didn't leave much room for surprises. But all that changed the night she met him, Alexander Foster. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. She'd bumped into him at a high-end bar, both of them nursing their own disappointment, both of them looking for something, maybe someone, to fill the void. The chemistry was instant, undeniable. They spent the evening talking about everything and nothing, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing minute. By the end of the night, they were sharing a taxi to his penthouse. Maya didn't think twice. She was tired of being the responsible one, tired of holding back. It was just one night, she reasoned. What harm could it do? But that one night turned into something she could never have predicted. Months passed, and Maya found herself in a situation she never imagined, pregnant with quadruplets. The shock hit her hard. She didn't know what to feel, what to think. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of it all. How had this happened? She had no idea. And even more, she had no idea who Alexander really was. The man she had shared that one night with seemed like a stranger now, a fleeting moment in her life. But as time passed, the reality of the pregnancy set in. She couldn't ignore it. She couldn't run from it. The pregnancy test trembled in her hand as she stared at the two pink lines. She had been through a lot in her life, but this was something else. She wasn't ready for it, but she had no choice. She was going to be a mother. Maya spent the next few weeks trying to figure out what to do. She couldn't bring herself to reach out to Alexander. He had never told her much about himself, just that he was a businessman. That was it. She didn't know his last name, his occupation, or where he came from. All she knew was that he had left her alone with this new reality. So, Maya did what she had always done. She figured it out on her own. She started researching, digging into what little information she had about him. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon his name, Alexander Foster. The name hit her like a brick. Foster. That was the name of the billionaire CEO behind one of the largest tech companies in the world. Maya felt a rush of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger. She had no idea the man she had slept with was a billionaire. He was a tycoon, a man who could have helped her, supported her, but instead, he had disappeared after that night. Maya couldn't understand why he hadn't reached out, why he hadn't told her who he really was. But she wasn't going to wait around for answers. She wasn't going to let him dictate her life. As the weeks went by, Maya worked hard to get her life back on track. She took on a second job to make ends meet, made sure to take care of her health and the babies growing inside her. The days blurred into one another as she tried to balance it all, work, appointments, and the constant worry about what the future held. She had her moments of doubt, moments when she questioned if she could do it alone. But there was no turning back now. Maya was determined to give her children the best life she could. She wasn't going to rely on anyone, especially not a man who had shown her nothing but silence. But fate has a funny way of working. One evening, just as she was leaving work, Maya bumped into a familiar face. It was Alexander. He looked just as she remembered, handsome, confident, and a little distant. He was standing outside a coffee shop, as if waiting for her. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let herself show it. She had moved on. She had to. But when he looked at her, his eyes softening with regret, Maya felt a flicker of something deep inside. He knew. He knew what he had done. Maya, he said, his voice low and sincere. I owe you an explanation. I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go like this. Maya didn't know what to say. Her emotions were a tangled mess. The man standing in front of her was the last person she ever expected to see again. And yet, here he was, asking for forgiveness. But was she ready to forgive him? Or had she already moved on from the person he was, the person who had disappeared when she needed him most? Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was it, the moment that would define everything. She had a choice to make, and it wasn't going to be easy. Maya stood there, her breath catching as Alexander stepped closer. The familiar scent of his cologne hit her instantly, but she didn't let it distract her. She had moved past that. She had to. She couldn't afford to go back to the way things were before. I didn't expect to see you again, Maya said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion she couldn't quite control. Alexander's face softened, the cool mask he usually wore slipping for a moment. I'm sorry, Maya. I should have been there for you. I should have told you who I was. His words hung in the air, heavy with regret. Maya wanted to believe him. She really did. But how could she? How could she forgive him after everything that had happened? After the silence, the months of uncertainty, the endless nights she spent wondering what could have been if he hadn't disappeared? She crossed her arms, trying to keep her composure. You disappeared, Alexander. You left me to figure everything out on my own. I didn't even know who you were. You didn't even care enough to tell me. She could feel the sting of her own words, but they needed to be said. He needed to hear them. Alexander looked down, his jaw tightening as if he were trying to hold back something much deeper than just regret. I was wrong. I was stupid. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to handle it. But that's no excuse for not being there for you, Maya. He paused, searching her eyes as if looking for some sign that she would forgive him. But Maya wasn't sure if she could. She wasn't sure if she could ever trust him again. She thought she could move on. She thought she had moved on. But standing here, facing him again, it felt like everything she had built in the past few months was crumbling. She had worked so hard to get to this point, to be strong for herself and for the babies. She couldn't let him ruin that. I don't need you, Alexander, she said, her voice firm but quiet. I've got this. I've built a life for myself and my children. I don't need a billionaire to help me. I never did. The words stung, but they were true. She didn't need him to define her anymore. She had done it on her own. But deep down, a part of her was still torn. She had wanted him to be there. She had wanted him to be the man she thought he could be. He stepped back, as if the force of her words had physically pushed him away. His eyes seemed to flicker with something unreadable, a mix of pain and understanding. I never meant to hurt you, Maya, he said quietly. And I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Maya shook her head. You can't fix everything, Alexander. Some things are just broken beyond repair. The silence between them stretched out, both of them standing there, unsure of what to say next. But Maya knew one thing for sure. She couldn't go back. She couldn't go back to being that woman who needed him. She wasn't that person anymore. She was stronger than that. As she turned to walk away, Alexander called out to her, his voice laced with desperation. Maya, please, don't walk away. I made a mistake, and I want to make it right. I'm here now. Let me help you. Let me help with the babies. I can't change the past, but I can be here for you now. Maya stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to turn around. She wanted to run back to him and let him take away the weight of everything. But she couldn't. Not anymore. She had come too far. She had built something for herself. And she couldn't let him take that away. I don't need your help, Alexander, she said, her voice steady but final. I've got this. I've always had this. She turned and walked away, leaving Alexander standing there, his face a mixture of regret and determination. Maya didn't look back. She couldn't. She had made her choice. And that choice was to move forward on her own terms. Maya's days were long, filled with the steady hum of work, doctor's appointments, and the constant buzz of thoughts about the future. The babies were growing stronger each day, and with every kick, every movement, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. The fear of being alone, of doing this without support, slowly faded as she embraced the strength she never knew she had. She had built a life for herself, and though it was harder than she ever imagined, it was hers. But there were moments when the weight of it all would catch up with her. Late nights, with only the soft hum of the city outside her window, she would stare at the ceiling, the emptiness of the room pressing in. Would she be enough? Would she be able to provide the life her children deserved? But every time those doubts crept in, she would remind herself of how far she'd come. She was stronger than she knew. She had to be. She had no other choice. One evening, as Maya left work, she ran into someone she hadn't expected. Again, it was Alexander. He was standing outside a restaurant, his posture tense, as if he had been waiting for her. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let herself falter. She was done second-guessing. She had moved on. She had to. Maya, he said softly, his eyes pleading with her in a way she hadn't seen before. Can we talk? She didn't respond right away. Her mind raced, thinking of all the reasons why this meeting was a mistake. But she saw the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't the confident, untouchable billionaire who could charm anyone into forgetting his mistakes. He was just a man who had hurt her, and now, he was asking for a second chance. I don't know what you want from me, Alexander, Maya finally said, her voice calm but guarded. I've moved on. I'm not that person anymore. You disappeared when I needed you the most. And now, you want to come back in and fix things? It doesn't work like that. Alexander's face tightened, and she could see the pain in his eyes. I know I hurt you, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you, Maya. I want to be there for the babies. I'll support you in any way I can. Maya felt a sharp pang in her chest. It was the offer she had always wanted to hear from him, but now, it felt hollow. She had done everything herself, and as much as part of her wanted to believe him, she wasn't sure she could ever trust him again. She had fought too hard to get where she was, and now, she wasn't about to let someone waltz back into her life just because they said the right words. I don't need your help, Maya said, her voice steady, yet laced with the quiet strength that had become her shield. I've built a life for myself. I've been doing it on my own, and I'm doing just fine. I don't need someone to fix me. She paused, watching him as he stood there, his eyes filled with regret. What I need is honesty. And you gave me none of that. You left, and I couldn't trust that you were ever going to be the man I needed. Alexander stood there in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Maya could see it, the realization that, no matter how many apologies he made, he had already lost his chance. I'm sorry, Maya, he said finally, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. I wish I could go back and fix everything, but I can't. I know I can't change the past, but I'll never stop trying to make things right, even if it means I have to do it from a distance. Maya looked at him, her heart heavy but resolute. I'm not waiting for you to fix things, Alexander. I'm already moving forward. With that, she turned and walked away, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. She wasn't the same woman she used to be. She didn't need saving. She had already saved herself. Maya sat in the quiet of her apartment, the soft glow of the evening sun casting a golden hue across the room. The babies kicked inside her, a constant reminder of how much had changed in such a short time. She had been through so much, and yet, the hardest part was over. She was no longer that unsure woman who was scared of the future. Now, she was stronger, more determined than ever. The weight of the decisions she had made had lifted, but the journey ahead was still long. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Jasmine. Maya, have you seen the news? Maya frowned and opened the message. The headline caught her eye. Alexander Foster, billionaire CEO, announces surprise engagement. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly shook off the feeling. Why should it matter to her? They had parted ways, and she had moved on. She set the phone down, forcing herself to focus on the present, on her babies. But the image of Alexander and the woman by his side lingered in her mind. It wasn't jealousy, she told herself. It was curiosity. She had been a part of his life, even if for a brief moment. He had been the first man she had truly trusted after so long. She had hoped for more, but now, she knew better. As days passed, Maya focused on preparing for the arrival of her quadruplets. She had learned to balance her job, her health, and the responsibility of being a mother. She was doing it all on her own, just like she had promised herself. But life had a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. One afternoon, as she walked to her car after work, she saw him again. Alexander. He was standing by his sleek black car, dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. Her heart raced, but she kept walking, determined not to let him see the effect he still had on her. She had made her peace with everything, or so she thought. Maya, he called after her, his voice reaching her even as she tried to ignore it. She stopped but didn't turn around. What do you want, Alexander? She asked, her voice calm but firm. I need to talk to you, he said, taking a step closer. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, but she wasn't ready to face him again. No, she said without looking at him. You had your chance. Maya, please, just let me explain. She turned to face him then, her eyes locking onto his. Explain what, Alexander? How you left me alone to deal with everything. How you weren't there when I needed you the most. She shook her head. You don't get to just show up and expect everything to be okay. You left, and I moved on. Alexander's face faltered for a moment, a look of regret crossing his features. But then he stepped forward, his voice low and earnest. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Maya, I want to be part of your life again. I want to be there for you and the babies. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right." Maya took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had wanted to hear those words so badly before. But now, it felt different. "You're too late, Alexander," she said quietly. "I've built something for myself, and I can't let you come in and undo everything I've worked for. I don't need you to fix things for me. I've already done that." There was a long silence between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Alexander looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He simply stood there, taking in her words, letting them sink in. Maya turned away, but this time, she didn't feel the sting of regret. She didn't feel like she was losing something. She felt empowered. She had made it this far on her own, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. "Goodbye, Alexander," she said softly, not looking back. As she walked away, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had made the right decision, and for the first time in a long time, she truly believed that she was going to be okay. She didn't need him. She didn't need anyone. She had everything she needed inside herself. Maya's life had taken on a rhythm she never imagined possible. The babies were due in a few weeks, and her body was a constant reminder of how much had changed. But the physical challenges didn't compare to the emotional journey she was on. Each day brought something new, some hurdle to overcome, but she had done it all on her own, just like she had promised. She had built a life, piece by piece, and there was no turning back now. She no longer looked to Alexander for validation, for approval. She had learned to rely on herself, and that was enough. But just when Maya thought she had finally found peace, her past crept up on her once again. It was another late night, the city quiet outside her apartment, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Alexander. I need to talk to you. It's important." Maya stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't heard from him in weeks, and part of her wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without him. But another part of her, the part that had once believed in him, couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this. She didn't respond right away. She wasn't sure if she should even entertain the idea of talking to him. But as the minutes ticked by, she found herself wondering what he wanted. Finally, she made the decision. She would meet him, but only to get closure. Nothing more. She texted back, "I'll meet you tomorrow. But this is the last time." The next day, Maya arrived at the coffee shop where they had agreed to meet. She sat by the window, watching the rain fall outside, her nerves building with each passing second. She wasn't sure why she felt so on edge. She had made her peace with him, hadn't she? She had moved on. So why did she feel like she was about to make a mistake? As if on cue, she saw him walk through the door. Alexander. He looked just as she remembered, tall, confident, and impossibly handsome. But there was something different about him now. His usual air of self-assurance was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. He looked older, more worn, as though the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. He spotted her across the room and made his way over. Maya didn't rise to greet him. She didn't want to make this easy for him. She wasn't here to make things right or relive the past. She was here for one thing, and one thing only: closure. "Maya," he said quietly as he sat down across from her, his eyes searching hers. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I need you to understand something. I was a coward. I was scared of what we could have been. And when things got too real, I ran." Maya's heart didn't skip a beat this time. She wasn't surprised. She had heard all the excuses before. "You don't need to explain yourself, Alexander," she said calmly. "I've heard it all, and it doesn't change anything." She paused, looking him in the eyes, her voice steady. "You left me, and I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. I don't need your apologies. I don't need you to fix anything." He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, but Maya pulled back slightly. "I don't want your pity," she added softly. "I've made it this far without you, and I'm not going to start depending on you now." Alexander's face fell, but he didn't pull away. "I don't want to fix things, Maya. I just want to be part of your life again. I want to be there for you, for the babies." Maya shook her head slowly. "It's too late for that, Alexander. I don't need you to be a father to my children. I've already been that mother. I've already done it all. I've raised them on my own, and I'm proud of it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with finality. Maya could see the struggle in his eyes, the hope he was clinging to. But she had moved on. She had built something for herself, and she wasn't going to let him take that away. You were a part of my life once, she said, her voice softening. But that was before. Now, I'm someone else. I've learned to stand on my own. And I'm okay with that. There was silence for a long moment, and for the first time, Maya could see the full weight of his regret. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to change the past. She had already healed. Goodbye, Alexander, she said quietly, standing up. She didn't look back as she walked out of the coffee shop, her heart calm for the first time in months. She was done with him, and she was finally free. Maya had closed that chapter of her life for good. Maya stood at the window of her apartment, looking out at the city that had become so familiar to her. The soft hum of the streets below was a constant reminder of how much had changed in her life. The babies were due in a few days, and despite the nerves that bubbled in her chest, she felt ready. She had come so far, and now, she was about to start a new chapter. A chapter she had written all on her own. The last few months had been a whirlwind of growth, independence, and determination. Maya had learned to take control of her own life, to embrace the future without needing anyone's validation or support. She had built a life for herself and her children, and nothing, not even the ghost of Alexander, was going to take that away. But as she prepared for the birth of her quadruplets, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. It wasn't the need for a man or for Alexander's presence. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite put into words. Maybe it was the idea of family. She had built her own family, but there was still a part of her that had always imagined a different version of it. A version where Alexander was there, supporting her, helping her raise the children they had created together. But that wasn't her reality. She had learned to be strong on her own. And yet, as the days passed and the birth drew closer, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she wasn't truly alone. That somehow, fate had other plans for her. One afternoon, just a few days before her due date, Maya was sitting in her favorite coffee shop, sipping on a cup of tea and reading a book. It was a rare moment of peace in a life that had been filled with so much uncertainty. She smiled to herself, thinking about how much she had grown over the past few months. She had learned to navigate the ups and downs, to find strength in the face of adversity. But just as she turned the page of her book, she heard a familiar voice. Maya, it said, low and tentative. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked up. There, standing in the doorway, was Alexander. He was dressed in a simple suit, his hair slightly tousled, and his eyes, those deep, searching eyes, were fixed on her. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She wasn't ready for this, wasn't sure if she ever would be. But then, he took a step forward, and the words came rushing out. I need to apologize, he said, his voice strained. I know I've made mistakes, and I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I've spent the last few months thinking about everything, about you, about what I've missed, and I can't live with the regret anymore. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't speak. She just watched him, waiting for him to continue. I know I've failed you, Maya, he said, his voice cracking. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm here now, and I want to be there for you, for the babies. Maya felt a rush of emotions, but she quickly pushed them down. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to let him come in and disrupt everything she had built. She had learned to be strong on her own. She didn't need him. She couldn't let him take away the independence she had fought so hard to gain. Alexander, she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. You don't get to come back into my life like this. You don't get to apologize and expect everything to be okay. She paused, locking eyes with him. I've already forgiven you. I've already moved on. And I've built a life without you. The silence between them was thick, but she could see the pain in his eyes. He had come here, searching for redemption, but the truth was, she didn't need him to fix her anymore. I'm not the woman I was when we first met, Maya continued. I'm stronger than that. And I don't need you to validate me. I've already found my strength on my own. There was a long pause as Alexander processed her words. He stood there, looking at her with a mixture of regret and longing. But this time, Maya didn't feel the pull of the past. She didn't feel the need to fix things. She had made her peace with it all. She had moved forward. And as much as she once wished for things to be different, she knew now that this was her path. I wish you all the best, Alexander, Maya said softly, turning back to her book. But I'm done looking back. I'm focused on the future. Alexander didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching her, before finally turning and walking out of the coffee shop. Maya watched him go, but this time, she didn't feel the familiar ache in her heart. She felt free. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maya's life had settled into a quiet routine, one that she had come to appreciate. The babies were born healthy, and although the challenges were endless, she was more than capable of handling them. Every day was a mix of feeding, comforting, and learning how to balance it all. She had moments where exhaustion seemed to seep into her bones, but she never let it get the best of her. She had faced the hardest moments on her own and emerged stronger, and now, with her children in her arms, she felt invincible. But as the months passed, a part of her began to wonder if there was more waiting for her. She had become used to being alone, but could she stay content with just the children? Was she truly fulfilled in this life she had carved out, or was there something missing? It was in these quiet moments of reflection that the memory of Alexander resurfaced. He had come to her when she least expected it, and although she had turned him away, she couldn't deny the feeling that had lingered in her heart. But no, she had moved on. She had chosen her path, and she wasn't going to look back. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging thought that there was something she wasn't seeing, something she was too scared to face. One day, as Maya was finishing up her errands, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Jasmine, her closest friend. "Maya, you won't believe who I just saw at the park. Alexander. He's back in town." Maya's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly set her phone down. No, she couldn't think about him. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. She had moved forward, hadn't she? But why did this news make her feel unsettled? That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the day pressing down on her, she couldn't help but think about the past. She thought about Alexander, how he had looked at her that day at the coffee shop, how he had seemed so lost and regretful. She thought about how he had apologized, how he had promised to be there. But no, that was all in the past. She was better off without him. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what had brought him back. What did he want now? Days passed, and Maya tried her best to push the thoughts of Alexander to the back of her mind. But her curiosity got the best of her. She found herself thinking about him, wondering if he had really changed or if he was just looking for a way back into her life. Was he truly sorry, or was he simply trying to fix a mistake that had long since been made? One afternoon, as Maya was taking the children to the park, she saw him. Alexander. He was standing near the swings, watching her from a distance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. He looked different, older, maybe a little more vulnerable. His suit was gone, replaced by something more casual, but the look in his eyes was the same. Maya stopped in her tracks, unsure of what to do. The sight of him stirred something deep within her, something she had thought she had buried. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face him again. But then, he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Maya," he said, his tone soft and filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She had promised herself that she was done with him. But here he was, standing in front of her, asking for something she wasn't sure she could give. "What do you want, Alexander?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I'm here for you." Was a long silence between them, and for a moment, Maya could see the regret in his eyes. She knew that he wanted to make things right, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to let him back in. "I'm not asking for anything, Maya," he said softly. "I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to be part of your life again. To be part of the children's lives." Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. She wasn't sure if she could trust him again. She wasn't sure if she could open herself up to the possibility of him being part of her life. But there was something in his voice, something in the way he was looking at her, that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as ready to let go as she thought. "I can't promise anything, Alexander," Maya said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll think about it." Maya spent the next few days in a state of confusion. The moment she had shared with Alexander at the park lingered in her mind, but she couldn't shake the doubt that had crept into her thoughts. She had promised herself that she was moving on, that she was done with him, but his words, his sincere apology, had stirred something inside her. What if he was telling the truth? What if he had truly changed? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. She didn't have time for this. She had her children to focus on, her career, her life. The babies needed her. But as the days passed, Maya couldn't help but wonder if she was being too stubborn. She had worked so hard to get to this point in her life, to build a future for herself and her children, and the idea of letting someone back in after everything that had happened felt like a risk she wasn't sure she was ready to take. Still, something about Alexander's sincerity gnawed at her. It wasn't just his apology that made her hesitate, it was the way he had looked at her. There was a vulnerability there that she hadn't seen before, a sense of regret that felt genuine. Maya couldn't ignore it. Another message from Alexander. Maya, I know I can't change the past, but I'm asking for a chance. I'm not asking for anything more than that. Just a chance to show you I can be the man you deserve. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. Part of her wanted to reply, to say something, anything, but the other part of her knew that she had already made up her mind. She had already let go. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She didn't need anyone to fix her. She had already done that on her own. But still, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to close the door completely. The next day, Maya found herself standing at the park again, the place where everything had started. Him and again. Maybe she didn't have to make this choice alone. I don't know what the future holds, Alexander, Maya said finally, her voice soft but firm. I'm not promising anything, but I'm willing to see where this goes. Alexander's eyes lit up with relief, but Maya held up her hand before he could say anything. But you need to understand, this is not about me needing you. I've built my life, and I'm not going to let anyone take that from me. If we move forward, it's because I want to, not because I have to. Alexander nodded, his expression one of understanding. I understand, Maya, and I respect that. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was ready to face it. In his eyes, a tenderness he had never shown before. Both in this together, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. She wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what she needed. Alexander leaned in and kissed the top of her head, a silent promise of the future they were beginning to build together. Softly at the children, his eyes filled with a tenderness she had never seen before. It was in those small moments, when he simply held their hands, when he whispered to them, when he helped her with the countless little things that added up, that Maya saw the man he had become. She could feel it. She wasn't the same woman she had been when they first met. And neither was he. Their past was still there, lingering in the background, but the present was theirs to create. Alexander, sensing her gaze, looked up and met her eyes. Maya, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of all that had been left unsaid, was real. It was theirs. And that was enough. Maya smiled, the weight she had carried for so long lifting from her shoulders. She had built her life, and now, with Alexander, they were building something new. Together. Maya sat in the living room, her gaze focused on the quiet chaos that filled her home. The babies were napping, and the house was still for the first time in hours. The world outside was bustling, but inside, it felt like time had slowed down, allowing her to catch her breath. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of change, from the small moments of connection with Alexander to the realization that she could open her heart again. It hadn't been easy, and it wasn't always perfect, but she felt stronger than ever. She had learned to balance her life, her role as a mother, and her growing relationship with Alexander. It wasn't about what had happened in the past, voice full of warmth. How are you doing? Maya's heart fluttered at the sight of him, and for a moment, everything else faded away. I'm good, she replied, her voice steady. Just taking a moment to breathe. He walked over and sat next to her on the couch, his presence a comforting weight beside her. I know things haven't always been easy, he said, his eyes meeting hers. But I'm glad we're here. Together. Maya nodded, feeling the sincerity in his words. Me too, she said softly. I've learned a lot. About myself. About us. Alexander's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. We've come a long way, he said. And we still have a long way to go, but I know we can do it. Maya's smile grew wider, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly content. He stayed late to help her clean up after a long day, or how he would wake up early to make her coffee without her asking. It was in the way he listened when she needed to talk, and how he never judged her for her past mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She had learned to trust him again, but this time, she didn't need him to complete her. She had already done that for herself. You to know, forward together. And for the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. She had come so far, and she was proud of the woman she had become. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. As she sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset with Alexander by her side, she realized just how much she had grown. The past had shaped her, yes, but it no longer held her back. She had learned to let go of the things that once haunted her, the things that had weighed her down. And in doing so, she had found freedom. "You're quiet tonight," Alexander said softly, his voice warm as he gazed out at the horizon. Maya smiled and leaned into him, feeling the comfort of his presence. "Just thinking," she replied, her voice full of contentment. "About everything we've been through." He nodded, his hand gently resting on hers. "We've come a long way," he said, "but I think we're finally where we're meant to be." Maya looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "I think so too," she said, a sense of peace washing over her. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it." They sat in silence for a while, the cool evening breeze brushing against their skin, the sounds of the world around them fading into the background. For the first time in years, Maya felt like she could truly breathe. She didn't need to worry about the past or the future. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had built a life she was proud of, and with Alexander by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. Together, they were building something real. Something that wasn't perfect, but was full of love, trust, and understanding. And that, Maya realized, was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she felt a sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her to this moment. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And with each new day, she was more certain that the future was full of possibilities. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. With Alexander, with her children, and with the strength she had found within herself.